Here we are again, Hornets, for another rousing round of ready reading. Look at that alliteration that I have. Okay, so that was poetry and the structure of poetry. Well, this week we're going to get in to our Ready Workbook lesson 15 on page 153, analyzing the structure of drama. And I'm not talking about drama the way that you're acting in life. I'm talking about drama as it's being acted on the stage. We took some notes on drama a couple weeks ago, and we're going to look back at some of those in a minute. But in the meantime, you need to make sure you have out your Ready Workbook, and it's open to page 153. And I'm going to go over a couple of slides before we dig into our workbook. Remember, you only have to write things down if they show up in red. You write it from the screen of me teaching into your workbook. Okay. So, all right. So let's go and look at our slide, and it says, Mr. Davidson spoke out loudly at the meeting, voicing his concerns about the proposed sports stadium. Well, after reading the sentence above, what are some character traits you learned about Mr. Davidson? And just in case, if we were going to use this as the beginning of a short story, we've got Mr. Davidson would be our character, and the setting that they've got. So Mr. Davidson's our character. Our setting is they're at the meeting. All right. Now, when it comes to character traits, those are things that you notice about the character, that they make the character that person. So, what are some things that you should have noticed about Mr. Davidson? Well, the first thing is that he's about to what we call speak out. And to speak out means that you're usually standing up for something to speak out for, or usually speak out against what they're talking about. Well, he's also being very loud, so we know he wants to be heard. And he wants to be heard about his concerns. Okay. So right now we know that Mr. Davidson is possibly opinionated. I'm drawing a conclusion, I'm making an inference, and that he's concerned about a proposed sports stadium. So now, if we take that, and that's just a sentence. Now, what if we were to try to take this sentence and move it from a single sentence in a possible short story to, let's say, a dialogue? That we wanted to turn it into a conversation between two characters. So on this one, we end up with, this is what it would look like. You have your characters. You've got Mr. Davidson and the moderator. Okay. We know from our previous sentence that they're where they are. So Mr. Davidson, and this right here, you see the stage direction right here, fervently. That means enthusiastically or passionate. He's really into what he's talking about, and he's going to put a lot of emotion, passion into what he's saying. And then so Mr. Davidson, a stadium of this size will bring increased traffic to our neighborhood, negatively affecting our quality of life. Your comments will be included in our community response, Mr. Davidson. So there's a distinct difference between Mr. Davidson and the moderator. The moderator did not have any stage directions to tell us how this particular actor should say this particular line. But we're going to assume just a little bit that it's going to be, different than Mr. Davidson's. So based on how it's looking at, I'm asking you what tone is he using? So we want to make sure we start with tone. Is it positive, negative, or neutral? Well, what do you think? Good job. You're right. It is negative. His tone's going to be a little bit on the negative side. And I'm going to say that just because fervently is passion or enthusiastic doesn't mean it's always positive. I have this word right here, which tells me that he's pulling a little bit on the negative side. And if it's going to affect our quality of life, that's other pieces of evidence that you want to look at to show your particular tone. Some people in the neighborhood might think increased traffic is good, but obviously Mr. Davidson does not. Our moderator has a much more neutral tone because our moderator is trying to keep Mr. Davidson from getting out of hand, because it sounds like someone who's going to keep talking about this and not let it go. Okay. So with that being said, we're actually going to look at how we structure drama. Okay. So when we structure drama, we want to make sure on page 153, the first thing we do is we box our title. All right. So we're looking at analyzing the structure of drama. And to reinforce the topic of this lesson, we're going to write it at the top of our page. So we're looking at analyzing the structure of drama. And we want to make sure we remember that analyze means to break it down. And what are we breaking down? Well, we're breaking down the structure. And drama's got a different structure than other things. When we looked at fiction, we looked at the structure of fiction as being in chronological order, with a story, with a narrative, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that the plot that we have our exposition, our rising action, our climax, our falling action, and our resolution. All of that is part of the structure of fiction. When we looked at poetry, we talked about the structure of poetry, and the structure of poetry first and foremost starts with trying to figure out if it's got a rhyme scheme, or if it's written in free verse. And from there, we use that rhyme scheme to figure out the rhythm and the beats of the syllables and how we're supposed to be saying our poem to help with the flow. Now, and we also have alliteration and the repetition in a poem that helps unify the entire structure. But for drama, we're looking at four major things. Okay. Drama, we're looking at stage directions, which is what you normally see in parentheses or in italics, depending on how the drama's been written. Dialogue, which is the conversation between the two characters. And we also have a subcategory of dialogue, which is monologues and soliloquies. A soliloquy is when the actor is standing solo, that root word solo, on the stage speaking directly to the audience about what's going on in their head. A monologue is mono, meaning one. We're using that particular root word, mono, and it is dealing with the fact that the actor has got a long speech on the stage, but they're speaking to other actors, but they're the only ones doing the talking. Dialogue means it's a conversation. That dia means multiple, means two, more than one, going back and forth between characters. And then we have scenes, and then we have acts. Okay. The acts is the big part, and each act is usually broken up into scenes when it's a long production. So we're going to keep going from that, and I'm going to delve into this a little bit more. So make sure you save room underneath stage directions dialogue, because I'm going to have some notes to pop up here in a little bit after we've read through all of this stuff. Okay. So, but before that, we're going to add a few notes next to drama. And this is types of drama. You have plays that you would go to the theater to sit and watch a live showing or a musical. And then you also have movies, which you can go to the theater or watch from home, television, TV shows, skits, even video games, YouTube. We can add TikTok now. Any video, anything, video, film, any acted out, anything that has a script, a screenplay, something that's written down for someone else to read and speak lines. That is a drama. You are acting out and acting different than you normally would, which is why we have that nice, euphemism today about your drama. Because if you're being dramatic, it's because you're not acting like your normal self. So we use it in a figurative way to explain your behavior. Now, hopefully Miss Murray didn't just completely take away the fun of saying, drama to you. Now we're going to go through, we're going to read, we're going to circle our theme, because this week we're going to be reading excerpts from the play, The Diary of Anne Frank. So it's turning this little girl's diary into a play. And it is the diary itself is nonfiction. It's an autobiography written in her hand. The play is where where Goodrich and Hackett turned her actual words into theater for everybody to see. Now, just in case for those of you who don't know, some background on the Diary of Anne Frank. This takes place during the 1940s, during the Nazi occupation of Germany and Poland, and during Denmark during World War II. And this is, and Anne and her family are Jewish. And ultimately, as we start reading the play and get into it, they're going to have to go into hiding so that way they do not get sent to any of the concentration camps and possibly and killed while they're because they're Jewish. So we're going to get more into that as we read this. I'm just giving you a little bit of background, and remember this takes place in another time, another era, 1940s, it's called the Holocaust. And now in 8th grade, I don't want to get in it too much because I know next year in 8th grade you actually read the entire play, and there's an entire unit developed with it. So that being said, we're going to go on and read our workbook page stuff. So there are many ways to tell a story. For example, a story can be told in a book, a movie, or through a play. All of these forms contain characters. I'm going to circle that, even though I don't underline it. And all of it contains characters, setting, and plot. Okay. But a play has some special characteristics. And there we go. Underline. First of all, a play or drama relies on dialogue, which is the characters' words, to move the plot forward. Dramas also contain, oh, you know what I'm going to add? I am going to add. So besides dialogue, remember, because dialogue is between two people, we also have the mono, you know what, Miss Mary will wait till I can spell it. Never mind. Because we know I'm not going to spell soliloquy right without looking at it. So that's the last thing I want to do. Okay. So the player drama relies on dialogue, the character's actions to move the plot forward. Remember, plot's got the exact same thing. That's the same plot triangle that we're used to using. A play does the exact same thing. Dramas also contain stage directions, which describe the setting and explain what the actors should do or how they should speak or behave. Those stage directions are important. That's where we get our setting, that's where we get our behavior, and the dialogue is what moves the whole thing. Dramas are organized into scenes, which are kind of like chapters in a book, and the scenes are grouped into acts. Think about each act as being like its own novella, or something. It's not quite an entire novel, but it's big enough to kind of go on its own. All right, so then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the bottom where it says we're going to read the beginning of the Diary of Anne Frank by Frances Goodrich and Albert Hackett. Oh, sorry, I forgot to box the title. We're going to be reading this, and that's the story. So go ahead and box the title in your workbook, because when we get to Act 1, Scene 1, the title's not written there. So I want to make sure you know the title. Okay. The play is based on a young Jewish girl's diary, which details the struggles endured by her family and friends when they had to go into hiding in an attic in Amsterdam during World War II. Now, later on, I'll show you some pictures of the attic, and we'll talk about some of that stuff too. But before we start that, which will be part of our next lesson, I wanted to make sure that we got Act 1, Scene 1 down the beginning of the play. So, on our next, okay, so here we are looking at Act 1, Scene 1, right? So the very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to, we should have already boxed our title. So just keep it in mind that it's up there. You already boxed the Diary of Anne Frank. Okay. Now we've got Act 1, Scene 1 of the Diary of Anne Frank. And we're going to number our paragraphs like we usually do. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Now, the other thing, so then we want to make sure that as we're reading this and looking at things, we want to make sure that we want to know who our characters are. And what our setting is. Remember, we're going to circle our characters when we find them, and we're going to underline our settings. Okay? And then, so what I want you to take notice of real quick is all of this stuff that's in italics. Let's look at our text features. Okay? You have Act 1 and Scene 1 that's written in dark, bolded, larger print. And then you've got the italics of paragraph 1, 2, and 3. And then at the beginning of paragraphs 4 and 5, you have non-italic, just straight up normal print words, and they start capital letters there, and then there's a colon after their names, and then we have more print. Sometimes you have the italics you'd have right there with quickly controlling himself. That's a stage direction. Remember, stage directions, they give us our what? Good, that's right. They give us our setting and explain what the actors should or shouldn't be doing and how they should speak or behave. And the dialogue in paragraph 4 and 5 is where we actually have the characters speaking to each other to move the plot forward. Okay, so as I read this, I want you to underline your setting and circle your characters, okay? So Act 1, Scene 1, The Diary of Anne Frank by Frances Goodrich and Albert Hackett. The curtain rises on an empty stage. It's late afternoon, November 1945. The rooms are dusty, the curtains in rags. Chairs and tables are overturned. The door at the foot of the small stairwell swings open. Mr. Frank comes up the steps into view. He stands, looking slowly around, making a supreme effort at self-control. He is weak, ill. His eyes caught by something lying on the floor. It's a woman's white glove. He holds it in his hand, and suddenly all of his self-control is gone. He breaks down, crying. We hear footsteps on the stairs. Miep Gijs comes up looking for Mr. Frank. Miep is a Dutch girl of about 22. She is pregnant. Her attitude toward Mr. Frank is protective, compassionate. Are you all right, Mr. Frank? Yes, Miep. Yes. Okay, end scene. All right. Now, notice I did not say Miep's name or Mr. Frank's name when I was reading. You just read their lines. Okay, so let's get back to what we noticed. Our setting, what did you underline as your setting? That it's awesome that it's late afternoon, 1945. That, let's see, we're in a room that we can see. We also have, and then we got characters that popped up. We have Mr. Frank. He's even coming up some steps to let us know that the room that we're in is upstairs somewhere. We also meet Miep. She's also coming up the stairs let's see. And as far as other characters, I can circle Miep right here. I always like to circle when people are supposed to be talking. It helps me keep in mind that it's someone's turn. So right now, my setting that I have here is, let's see, it's November 1945. We're in a room. I'm going to get back to what that room might look like. Characters, I have Mr. Frank and I have Miep. All right. Now, I want to go back through here and I want to know more about my setting, because a play is set up for you to see it. They're meant to be not just read, they're meant to be seen. So what here is going to help me understand some things about this room that they're in. What does the room look like? So we're going to go back through and underline some more things about our setting to help me understand what my room could possibly look like. Well, my first paragraph, it says that the rooms are dusty, the curtains in rags. What does that tell you? Well, first off, it tells me that if something's dusty, that means no one has dusted it in a long time and they've allowed dust to accumulate, which means that no one has been there to move the dust, to not just clean it even, but to even be around there to make the dust move. And if the curtains are in rags, that means nobody has been up there to take care of the curtains or to clean the or to clean the room. So that's letting me know that the room might be a little bit dirty, out of use. And then I have this right here where the tables and chairs are overturned. I had a question about that. Anytime I see tables and chairs overturned as a teacher, I'm like, what happened? Oh my goodness, because I immediately think maybe a fight broke out. I'm going to write a fight in a question mark. I'm not sure what happened. They could have left in a hurry. Who knows? But did a fight break out? That's what I'm looking at. Um, and then you've got that. Let's see what else. Then you have that small stairwell that you can see him coming up the stairs. And I'm thinking, is there anything else in the room that catches my eye that lets me know that nobody's been here in a while, that maybe a fight broke out, it's dirty, it's out of use? Okay. And if not, that's okay. All right, that no one has been there for a while. Now, my next thing is we're going to go back through and circle things about my characters. I want to know more about Mr. Frank. So I'm going to give you a second. I want you to go through and circle some things that you noticed about him as a character, that if you were going to have to act him out, this is telling you how that you should behave, what your audience should see. So what do you think? Well, one of the ones for me is where it says he is looking slowly around. And from my own previous, not past experience and prior knowledge, I know that if you're looking slowly around, you're trying to take something in. You're taking the time to look around and figure out what happened. And if he's having to make an effort at self-control, that means that he's close to losing control, whether that's getting angry or whether that's getting upset. Usually, if you're having to contain yourself and stay in control, you're trying to keep yourself from being overly emotional. And we want to be able to see that. We should also physically see that he is weak and ill, that he's not in the best health. So this is letting us know that he's not feeling that great. So we add all these things up. Okay. And then we see the part where his control slips and it's gone. And he eventually breaks down crying. Based on this about Mr. Frank, what have I learned? Well, I learned that he might be sick. And he might be very, very sad. The crying and the having to keep him, if he's breaking down crying and having been trying to keep it in, and that he is very, very upset. He is sad. He is mournful. That's a vocabulary word from a few weeks ago. That he's grief stricken is what it looks like. And then I'm going to go look at Meep, and where we talk about Meep, and we learn that she's a Dutch girl of about 22. So we're getting to make sure that she's much younger than Mr. Frank because we call her by her first name. We don't call her Mrs. We call her just Meep. We also learn that she's pregnant and that her attitude towards Mr. Frank is protective and compassionate. So we learn that Meep cares about Mr. Frank. Okay. So right there, we got in a lot of information about the setting of what's about to go down when it comes to this particular story. So let me scroll up. Okay. So now down here at the bottom part we're going to look at this, and it wants us to underline the details in the stage directions. Oh, look, and dialogue that tell you something about the setting and the characters. We did that. We underlined our setting. We circled things about our characters. Okay. And then we're going to compare what we learned. So, which means compare means how things are alike. What we learned of the information in the chart. The setting, November 1945. We wrote that down. Got it. And no one has lived in the rooms for a long time. We put that they looked dirty and they hadn't been in use. So we got that. Yay. For characters, we've got that Mr. Frank is ill and sad. We said he was sick and sad, and he was upset. That works. We got that. We got that Miep was pregnant Dutch woman who's protective of Mr. Frank. We also got that. Now, this is what we didn't talk about. So, plot. Here's where putting all of these things, the setting and the characters here is going to help us get to that. All right, so the setting and the characters help us get to this. So, and when we say setting, I mean the stage directions. Okay, for both of this, a lot of it. Okay, stage directions for setting and characters to help us get to this overall plot. And the big part of this plot was that finding the glove makes Mr. Frank cry. And that something tragic must have happened here. We actually even got that with the overturned tables and looking at something, because I told you it looked like a fight. And that's us trying to make that inference about how this is going to go. So, our last thing that we're looking at is when you read a play, imagine this is our big keyword, imagine it's being performed with actors on a stage. If you're not actually watching a play, the stage directions, there we go, and the dialogue help you visualize what's going on. So be sure to read them both very carefully. All right. So with that, that is going to end our lesson 1 introductory part of analyzing the structure of drama. And tomorrow we will get into some more stuff about some background on the Diary of Anne Frank. So that way you have a deeper understanding of what's going on. All right, guys, like always, if y'all have any questions, let us know.